Welcome to What Matters Most. We are dedicated on educating the community about holistic, spiritual, and metaphysical topics. Each week we discuss things that matter most in life. Those things that may be most important to you, but may have fallen to the wayside.
We are always centered on the idea of simplifying life, connecting with our neighbors, and following our true paths. Our mission is to empower you to live the life you've always dreamed of living.
We invite you to focus your life on what matters most.
Hi, you're here today with What Matters Most. I'm Kristen.
And this is Maria.
From Experience Nirvana. We're here today with Dr. Catherine P. Perry, who is the psychotherapist-turned-spiritual healer. She's an intuitive and visionary who authored the empowering book Courageous Wake. She's an expert in human development, human capacities, intuition, and energy medicine. Dr. Catherine is known for helping people from all walks of life melt the roadblocks to happiness, healthy relationships, prosperity, and peace of mind. Welcome, Dr. Perry. How are you today? Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, I'm absolutely great. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Absolutely. Today we'll be discussing children are more psychic than you think. I think that's a fabulous topic because I think a lot of people don't actually realize that children have can have psychic abilities just like an adult could.
Absolutely. And I think that people are coming to the awareness that there's more going on than they maybe originally were taught is going on, simply because more and more adults are noticing their abilities.
Exactly.
And so they're noticing it in other people, including their children.
Absolutely. Now I know there's some things that you should not stifle. There's certain aspects, certain things that parents need to be very aware of.
Yes. I mean, number one, a child is like a walking, or if they're walking yet, they're like a sponge. They are just one subconscious mind out there picking up on vibrations, whether the vibrations are coming from sound, whether it's coming from thought, whether it is the vibration of emotion. And they're very, very open. And so what is coming in, whether it's you talking to them or they're picking up perhaps something from the metaphysical world, it's all coming in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What happens is they can be very empathic and maybe take on the sense of an emotion that might not necessarily be theirs, but they could be picking it up from someone else in the room they're in.
I see.
Or possibly even the emotion of a dead relative.
Wow. Let me ask you a quick question, Dr. Perry. Do you think that happens? Is that more prevalent in children than it is in adults? Is it just because of the fact that they're just such an open vessel at that particular point in time? Or this is something that maybe we all have, but children more so? I just don't know.
Yes, the children are more open. You said the word open, and that is exactly what it is. You know, they're born with their abilities. The intuition or the psychic response is built in. And what happens is during the process of being parented and living a life and being conditioned to the social expectations of their culture, they learn to either accept or shut down through the use of the left brain critical factor, if you will, what I can and can't do, what I should and shouldn't do. And they start making little rules for themselves. What do they need to govern? And so, if they are open, which they're born that way, then naturally they're not going to
And then also, I guess what we want to mention is that what are some of the things that happen? What are the problems that would be associated by them shutting it down? Shutting down that capability and that intuitiveness.
Well, number one, and this is relating to just general human development, and that is, we always want to consider how to help our children develop to their full capacity as well as people and later adults. And so when we are not acknowledging a child's intuitions, such as a precognitive awareness, thinking of something before it happens and then it happens, for example, what happens is we can hinder their basic sense of self-trust.
Okay.
And they might go into some self-doubt and not have so much the motivation to initiate thought and new ideas. And they may doubt themselves. Mm-hmm. That's one of the problems that can arise. Another problem that can arise is that they could go into a sense of fear and even guilt. Some parents help kids inadvertently anyway shut down their abilities by driving kind of a fear-based thought into them. It could be because of a religion. Oh, well, you're not supposed to do that. That's evil. And that's happened before. An extreme would be a parent who believes, and this really happened. I had a case in which a parent was an evangelical, very strong, extreme religion, believed that the child was evil because the child had these abilities.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And at the point at which the child was 16 years old, the father actually attempted to burn the child at the stake. She got away. She ran away. But this is very extreme. Of course, she had extreme emotional problems because of that.
Wow. Now, Dr. Catherine, my question is there a certain age that a parent could actually start to assist their children with their abilities? Like, could you start them as a baby? Could you start maybe during pregnancy? You know what I'm saying? Is there a certain time that's ideal to actually start to maybe help them develop?
Yeah, I would say that there's not necessarily an ideal age because everybody's different. No two of us are exactly alike. But because we are energy and because we are energy vibrates, so we are vibrational beings, certainly even communicating to the child while the child's in the womb is a wonderful thing to do. There's already been some literature about the benefits of, for example, listening to Mozart and other pieces of peaceful music to stimulate the brain, for example, while the child is in the womb. The child is going to be affected by emotions and attitudes of the mother while it's in the womb. Of course, as the child comes out, we must always assume that they can pick up in some way our emotions, our thoughts, our ideas, our attitudes. So we want to be consciously aware of that and simply to communicate what it is we want to communicate, whether it's loving thoughts or I trust you, you are important. These things can be transmitted and received by a child at any age.
And I guess maybe that's also why it's so important for the caregiver, if I should say, to be so aware of this and recognizing this and actually starting, like you said, at any point, but even as early as in the womb, because really those individuals that are really going to start the awareness process and then really nurture it and continue to do that so that you end up with a person that's really so empowered with this wonderful gift that we all actually are born with and actually have in us.
That's a very good point, and I love the word empowerment that you use. I mean, it really is about empowering the child to function at his or her highest capacity at whatever age she or he is. And, of course, awareness of the parent has to do with their own awareness of their abilities and to know that whether or not they've developed them, that they do have them. They do have abilities.
I kind of look at it and think about it as a gift. It's a gift that we all have. And maybe we just don't, many of us are not aware of this gift. And wow, what an impact and a change not only can we be making in our lives, but the lives of others by by being empowered with this gift, and not be fearful of it. So much of it, I think, kind of just dates back to years and years, and maybe heavy religious beliefs and things of that nature, fearfulness of this capability. And let go of that. And so this is like such a strong and powerful thing that you're nurturing and doing. Wow, right?
It really is. And I think that you hit it right on the head there with the word fear, and fear being fear-based reactions. And one thing I talk about often is this notion of seeking knowledge outside of ourselves, having been programmed into our being. How do we learn what's true? And you're right, through religious systems and even through the system of science. Science has almost been sort of a pseudo-religion in that the dogma inherent there is still telling people you have to go through us to know what's true. You can't trust yourself to have knowledge. We have to create it for you. And this fear of going against the grain of whatever the mainstream is. Let's face it, for centuries, people were killed and imprisoned and tortured for having ideas that go against the grain. I mean, look what happened to Galileo. He was arrested and put on house arrest for the rest of his life by the Catholic Church because he spoke of his ideas of what the celestial bodies were and what they were doing. They thought he was interpreting knowledge, basically biblical knowledge, stepping on their turf. So this energy of fear related to having your own idea, even if it's independent of what the majority are doing, can very well still be feeding into that fear base where people are saying, well, I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if I can believe that. Who is giving me social permission to have this experience?
Now, my question, Dr. Catherine, is are there certain things that parents should be on the lookout for? Are there certain things, certain cues to be aware of, to look for in your child?
Yes. You're not going to look at your child under a microscope, of course, but in the normal course of a day, if your child says that she's scared, for example, and she saw something, and she doesn't know how to describe what it is, well, I guess the best thing to do there is to just sit and listen to what it was and to validate the child by saying, wow, you were really scared of that. And I'll give you an example. Let's say a child says he saw a round, dark-colored disc in their room floating, and they didn't know what it was, or there was a face. All right, this is a time just to listen and let them speak about what's going on. Problem in that area could be if a parent doesn't want to believe it, and they say, well, it was just your imagination. It's not a good idea to do that. It's better just to focus on letting the child express himself and how he or she felt. And give the child some ways of protecting himself against something like this. Whether or not you saw it yourself, it would be to say, you know what, did you know you can, with your mind, make light around your body like a shield, and so nothing like that can never harm you. Wow, I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah.
And another thing would be is that, if a child suddenly has a mood swing, suddenly goes into worry or sadness or fear, and they can't figure out what's going on, that's definitely something to look at. Because it could be that they're having some kind of empathic experience. They could very well have taken on the emotions of an angry teacher. Or perhaps there's a troubled child in the classroom who has some anxiety, perhaps, and they might have taken on some other feeling, and they don't know how to tell the difference between what they feel and what someone else feels. Or they could be afraid that something bad is going to happen. Don't shut that down. Ask the kid, what is it? What did you sense? What do you think's going on? And you don't have to give an explanation. Don't feel like you have to interpret it for the child. Just listen. Just be available.
I'm thinking as you're talking about the validation, because I'm going back, but I'm from the time and the where it would have been, that's your imagination time frame, there was no validation, so it really kind of just like push it away, it doesn't exist, you're just imagining it. And so it's so wonderful that getting this word out now about just validate it, like you said, you don't even have to try to explain it, just okay, it's okay, what you saw was real. Yeah,
and I'll give an example. When I was a child, being psychic or having intuitive presence, talking to spirits, and know that there was not even a vocabulary going around about that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
One day I just knew that my grandfather was going to die, and I knew I had seen him for the last time. And when I told my family that, they just thought, oh, that's ridiculous. You're just worrying for nothing, blah, blah, blah. And within 3 weeks, he passed away.
Wow. And so what did they think then? After
They absolutely wouldn't talk about it.
Oh, wow.
They couldn't talk about it. And on another occasion, and this has happened to a lot of children and people I've worked with, things like this, but in this case I had a premonition that warned me to tell my mother to reschedule a flight that my sister was going to be on. She went ahead and rescheduled it, which makes me think that she might have had some psychic ability too, because normally she wouldn't listen to a child's advice like that. And we rescheduled the flight, and sure enough, on the day of that flight, it actually did crash.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. That's really some heavy stuff. And so it makes me think at that point she must have, even if she hadn't said anything to you directly, she must have been thinking, wow, this is, my child has some type of ability, even if it wasn't something that she could actually talk about out in the open for whatever reason. Right?
Yeah, she knew it. And this happens often with people. They know on some level that there's a truth to it, but they just consciously, they cannot express it, but they know.
Wow, that's wild. Now, I have a question, is that, are some children more gifted than others, or do they all come out with the same capabilities, and it just depends on how much the parent actually nurtures and supports it?
My experience and my inner knowing demonstrates to me that some people do come in more developed than others. Some people do come in, and the example I gave is with basketball. Pretty much everybody who comes in to the planet probably has the ability to play basketball in a PE class that they have at school. But not everybody turns into a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant.
Of course.
You hear what I'm saying?
Sure.
Some people are born with more talent in one area or another. Or even if you have, say, you have 5 psychic children who come in with average abilities, one person occasionally sees auras, another person doesn't see auras, but they sense the presence of spirits. And another person might be telepathic. They might be able to do that, but they don't have dreams that tell the future.
Okay.
So they might show up with different aspects of psychic ability, but not necessarily have all of them.
Right, maybe some are clairaudience or whatever the case. Oh my gosh.
Sure, and just as we come in with the ability to learn language, some people tend to be better speakers. Some people, how about singing? Anybody can sing a song, but not everybody gets to be a Whitney Houston or, one of these major stars. So, some people are born with more talent, but that doesn't mean that everybody doesn't have the ability. Everybody does.
Okay. All right. And my other question is it ever too late to try to help assist your child's, let's say, psychic muscle? Let's say you have a child and she's, 8, 9 years old, and you're just listening, one of our listeners is listening to the show, and they decide, I've never tried to help my child, but I'd like to start now. Is it too late, or is it never really too late?
It is never too late. It is absolutely never too late. A person can develop their abilities at any age. In fact, many of the people I work with come to me, they're adults, who want to open up their psychic channels even more and learn to use their abilities. And even after one session, they are noticing they're having more psychic experiences.
Wow.
Yeah, because the more you open up to it, the more you receive, and it just becomes a cycle of, like, you become this little antenna that's really, vibrating on at a very strong
level.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and part of it, I really believe this, and this is just based on what I've seen happen, is that feel like they have social permission to do. One of the biggest questions that people ask me is, am I normal? And I ask them, is it important for you to be normal? Yeah, I don't want people to think I'm crazy. I'm like, well, what if I told you there's no such thing as normal?
I was just thinking that. Yeah. I was just thinking that. What's normal?
The word normal is based on social conditioning and social expectation and culture. So there really is no such thing. And as we evolve, we keep changing what that means. So as soon as they let go of that, the need to fit in, the need to be normal, suddenly they open up and they're able to allow themselves to have experience outside of that box.
Yeah, well, and even necessarily, even if they have abilities, they don't have to go screaming it to the world, you know. I mean, if they did, you know, I mean, everyone's a little bit crazy in their own way, but, you know, you don't have to, you know, announce it on a loudspeaker, you know.
Good point. Very good point. But I would also say that it's important now more than ever that if we do have a psychic experience and we're not sure about it, or if we can talk about it, it might be a good idea to share that with somebody. And I don't mean get on a loudspeaker, but don't be afraid to express it. You never know who you can help. You never know who you can help. And I can say that, you know, there were clients I was working with where they wouldn't bring up anything about the psychic stuff, and I would sense that they had something to tell me, and so I would go ahead and share an experience of mine. The next thing I know, they're like, oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I wanted to tell you about this. I wanted to tell you about seeing my dead grandfather in my kitchen, but I thought you would think I'm crazy. By sharing it, you open the door for them to come on out and talk about it and have it be okay for them. So don't hold back.
That's funny. So, Dr. Catherine, what are some things that parents can do to really help assist their children with their abilities to grow their quote-unquote psychic muscle?
What parents can do is they can educate themselves. They can find someone out there in the community who teaches how to develop and the nature of intuitive and psychic ability.
Okay.
As they learn more about those things within themselves, they're much more able to nurture that within their child.
Okay.
Then they can open up a better dialogue with the child and talk to the child, educate the child. It would be no different than educating your child in a particular subject.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Find out, get more information for yourself, and then you have more to talk about with your child.
And I'm kind of thinking that we need to get this into the school system. You know, you and I chuckled about that the other day. Yeah, wouldn't that be wonderful to have programs that would actually be, you know, curriculum that could to help reinforce it and guide that along the way, just as we do so many other things in the you know, maybe the structure needs to be changed a little bit, or you know, it's all about enlightenment. And what I'm thinking is that the planet is at such a high vibrational rate at this point in time. Are there more children that are coming into the planet at this point that are, if I should use the terminology, gifted or intuitive and psychic and all of that? Is this a time frame where we're seeing more of that?
We are seeing more of that, and we will continue to see more of that. And there will be a point where we're not really using the word gifted, because we're noticing that they're just coming in more open.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're coming in more open and more integrated. These are very experienced souls, and of course I use that word instead of old soul because the soul doesn't age. But we've got some very experienced souls on the planet now, and we have more coming in. They're coming in the higher vibrations, higher dimensions, as we are already shifting into higher dimensions of functioning. So yes, we will be seeing a lot more of that, and we will have to shift the way we're doing parenting, because these kids are going to be so sophisticated that the old ways of parenting aren't going to be working.
Wow. And I'm just curious, like, what are the suggestions? What would you say that they just have to do? Is it part of the validation and the awareness, but more to it than that?
It's awareness of the parents is going to be very, very important.
Key, okay.
Parents are going to have to be on their own path of self-discovery to be able to deal with this. They cannot live in the old construct. For example, the whole notion of right and wrong and placing guilt and shame on a kid as a motivator, that's not going to work, because the new kids coming in are going to be very aware of this higher vibration of cause and effect, but not necessarily right and wrong. I world. But what I'm saying is they're not going to be in the old fear-based model of guilt and shame. They're going to be looking at their experience and making discoveries about what that experience means. Discerning, well, what do I want to do next? And so parents are going to have to use much higher ways of functioning, be much more collaborative, less controlling, and more collaborative and cooperative with these children.
Wow, and so in mentioning that, it really does make me realize and become aware of the fact that people really need to do what they need to do to be able to shift that consciousness in themselves, because like as you said, it really all starts with them and then it continues to move forward. It's part of that rippling effect that's going on in the planet. And I'm sorry, I have to step back a moment and actually and reflect and say something about the fact that you mentioned that we don't use the terminology of gifted, and that's so powerful, I think, because you're right. Gifted to me is something that I think of like only a few chosen people are gifted with that ability, and so it's much bigger and broader than that.
Much more. And I might mention to you, as these new children are coming in, and they've been coming in, please understand that all of us are opening more. So people are awakening to the greater experience of themselves, whether that be to be more psychic or simply to be more self-aware or sense more self-love. So the parents, the new parents are also more open because the shift that's occurring is bringing that about.
What changes? What wonderful changes we have the capability of seeing. What a great time to be on this planet, and isn't that wonderful that we made that choice? But I do have to ask you, because we're getting close to the conclusion of the show, and it's a question that we ask everybody. So what is it, Dr. Perry, that matters most to you as far as what you're doing, the impact that you'd like to make on this planet at this point in time?
What matters most is empowering people, and of course empowering people to accept every aspect of themselves with compassion. All falls into the category of self-love. That is the number one thing.
Wow. Well, I think that's a great point, and I think we should strongly urge our listeners to maybe this week, one thing to work on is practicing a little bit more self-love. I know I could definitely do it for myself, Maria. I'm sure you could too. I think we're probably all culprits. And I think I pose that to our listeners. This week, take a little bit, maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes every day, and practice a little bit self-love, and once you get into the habit, you can make it part of your daily routine.
That sounds wonderful. One of the things I do first thing in the morning before I even open my eyes is I say I love you to myself.
Wow.
Wow, what a nice way to start the day, too. You're right, because we're so geared on doing. That's something you forget to do for yourself, and that it all starts within the. When you love yourself, it just spreads out.
Absolutely.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Catherine. It's been quite inspiring and truly motivating. I mean, I have a daughter of my own, and I'd love to start maybe implementing some of these tidbits that you've shared with us. So for our listeners, if you want more information about Dr. Catherine Perry, you can visit her website at www.catherinepperry.com, and the book Courageous Wake is available at Amazon.com, authorhouse.com, and through her website as well.
And so as we conclude this particular show with Dr. Catherine Perry, what a pleasure it was. And then once again, we'd like to remind our listeners that the simple things in life are what matters most. Namaste.
Namaste.